Hey everybody, this is Ginny back at it again with another video for IM3, and today we are filming a review for the EOC that is coming up, so let's get right into it. So first, let's start off with some basic quadratics. You're going to see a lot of this. So let's start off with x squared minus 7x plus 10. How are we going to factor that? So let's do the method I like to use, which is just my little diamond or x method. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that number, put it on top of the x, so 10. We're going to take that one, put it on the bottom. So that is negative 7. And so what we're going to find is the top, what number do we have that multiplies to 10 but also adds to negative 7? So let's think, what goes in 10? Let's just try 5 and 2. So let's do 5 and 2, and that multiplies to 10, correct, but does it add to negative 7? No. What numbers make a positive? Two negatives? Correct. So negative 5 and negative 2. So those are our numbers, and we're going to plug that back in by doing x minus 5, parentheses, and then times x minus 2. And so our two factors of x are x is equal to 5 and x is equal to 2, because you change the sign of whatever is in the parentheses. And there is our final answer. Okay, so next up, guys, we are going to do vertexes. So vertex is the little point of a parabola. So this would be the vertex of any given parabola. All right, everyone, we're going to say this parabola's equation is x squared minus 4x plus 1. So how are we going to find the vertex of that? Negative b over 2a. So I have here labeled a, b, c, the x squared, the x, and then the constant. So what is your b value? It's negative 4, but since it's negative, negatives cancel out. It's just 4. And then a is just, it has nothing in front of it, so that just means 1. Does not mean 0, contrary to popular belief. And so that's going to get us 2 times 1, which is 2, and 4 over 2 equals 2. So, that is the x value of your vertex. So we can go ahead and fill out the first parenthesis, and that gets us 2. And then to find the y value, you are going to plug it back into your original equation. So this equation right here. And there's like an f of x equals or y equals, whatever you prefer. So we are going to do 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 1. And 2 squared is 4. And 4 times 2 is 8. So minus 8 plus 1. So 4 minus 8 is negative 4 plus 1 is equal to negative 3. So that is our second point, which is the y value. So your vertex is therefore 2, negative 3. And that is our final answer. All right, another common problem you're going to see on the EOC is exponentials. What is an exponential, you ask? It's something that is raised to the power. So a superscript, if you will. Let's try y equals 200 times 1.03 raised to the power of t. So if you see a variable in the exponent, that can be x, y, z, a, b, c, d, e, f, g, blah, 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 or t as we have here, congratulations, you have an exponential. So let's imagine this as money. So I start with $200 and I am growing by 3% every day. That's where we get our 1.03. It would not just be 0.3 or 0.03 because we have 100% of our money to begin with. So we have to add that to the 1 because it's not decreasing. If it was decreasing, then it would be 0.97 because we are subtracting the 3 from the 1. Sorry, the 0.3 from the 1. And so this equation just represents that I have $200 and I'm getting bigger by 3% every single day, and let t represent time or the amount of days that I am calculating how much money I have. On the EOC, a big thing they like to ask is this growth or decay? So it's pretty simple. If the number inside of the parentheses that's being raised to the exponent is larger than 1, then you have growth. However, if it's less than 1, you have decay. Simple as that. All right, another thing you're gonna need to know is the unit circle. And this one, there's not really a big trick for it. I have another video on that Josephine was in, and it's just all memorization pretty much. So you have your unit circle, like so. So you're probably just going to be asked to find a random point. So let's say cosine of 45 degrees. Cosine of 45 degrees. And where would that be on the unit circle? Well, it would be in the first quadrant because it is less than pi over 2. So that's pi over 2. We can just put our basic points. So this is 0. That's pi over 2. And that is pi. That's 3 pi over 2. And 0 is also equal to 2 pi, depending on what you're saying. Have you only just started, or have you made an entire rotation around the circle? So cosine of 45 is actually going to be roughly right here, because this angle right here is 90 degrees, because 90 is always going to be that little square perfect right angle. And so you know that it's going to be half, because 90 divided by 2 is 45. So it's going to be right there for you. And what is the coordinate point at 45 degrees? It is root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. So the increments of 45 are always easier to remember for me, because they match each other, except signs. But since we're all positive here, that doesn't apply to us right now. But for cosine of 45, cosine is at the x or y value. That is the x value. So cosine of 45 is equal to root 2 over 2. I wish I could tell you there's a simple trick to remember this, but really it's just memorization, and you got to get those reps in, have your unit circle all memorized. So another really important thing on the EOC is going to be your systems of equations. And here we have one. It's just going to be this silly little bracket, sort of looks like a backwards 3. But we have our two equations here. And what we're going to do for this one, it's actually pretty simple, because you can see both equations are equal to y. So that means y equals y, so you can set them equal to each other. So you have 3x minus 2 is equal to x plus 4. And then you're just going to solve for x, because what you're doing in this is you're going to find the point where they intersect. So it would be something like this, and you're finding that point where they intersect by doing this system of equations. So what you're going to do now is just solve like regular. So let's just say, let's subtract that x. So you have 2x minus 2 equals 4, and then you want to get the x on that side and the number on that side. So let's do plus 2, and we get 2x equals 6. Divide by 2 on both sides, and you get x is equal to 3. So there, you can fill in your first parenthesis, which is your x value, which is 3. And then you can just plug that into either equation to find the y value. So let's choose this one. So y equals x, which is 3, plus 4. So 3 plus 4 equals 7. So therefore, y equals 7. There you have the intersection of this system of equations. It is 3, 7. All right, now let's head on to a transformation. So we're going to start with this basic equation. All right, everyone. So we're going to start with the basic equation, y equals x squared. And if you imagine that, that's just going to be your run-of-the-mill basic parabola. And so what we're going to do is we are going to transform it by putting x minus 3 inside of the parentheses squared, and then plus 2. So you're thinking to yourself, what does all this mean? Am I rotating? Am I flipping? Am I stretching? No, you are not doing any of that for this problem. You're just going to be moving up/down or right and left. So it's just a basic transformation problem, but we've got two different things being done to our original equation. So the first one is x minus 3. Is that going to be right, left, up, or down? So when it's in the parentheses, you know it's actually going to be right or left. What we're going to do here is see x minus 3. You would think that is moving to the left, but the minus is actually lying to you, and it's moving to the right. Anything in the parentheses is going to be done the opposite. Similar to factoring, when you get that answer, you do the opposite sign. So that means our parabola is going to be moved to the right 3. And then this one, we know it can't be left or right, so it's got to be up or down. But is it up or down? Maybe you're thinking down, because the last one we flipped the sign, but no, if it's outside of the parentheses, it's just going to be exactly what it says. So it's going to be moving up 2. So we know that our parabola is getting transformed to the right 3 and up 2. Perfect. All right, now let's do a quadratic expression where we cannot just simply factor. All right, so let's do x squared plus 3x plus 1. Whenever you see a quadratic, immediately you're going to jump to factoring. But let's say we've already done that, and this is not factorable, as we can see. So we've got to pull out our handy-dandy quadratic formula, which you've got to have memorized. And that is our fun little song, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And so we can remember that, and we can write that down. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. All right, so we have that, and you memorize that with your little song. So we're going to start with our negative b, and that is 3, so it would be negative 3. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 9, or you could leave it as 3 squared and simplify it later, totally up to you. Minus 4 times 1, because 1 is A, and then times C is also 1. So that's pretty simple. All over 2A, which is just 2. So let's simplify that. Negative 3 plus or minus. What is negative 4 times 1 times 1? That's just negative 4. So that's 9 minus 4. So you have inside the parentheses, you have negative 3 plus or minus square root 5 all over 2. And so if you need to simplify that further, you could also just do negative 3 over 2 plus root 5 over 2. You can't just separate those. You've got to actually have the denominator on both the numerators. And you also have negative 3 over 2 minus root 5 over 2. And those are your two solutions to this problem. And then since this test is going to be multiple choice, let's just practice a simple thing, which is simplifying radicals. So let's take square root of 50, for example. You're thinking, what goes into 50? What is 50 divided by 2? It's 25. So you have 25 times 2. You can write that out and expand it. 25 times 2. And can we root either of those? Yes. 25 is a perfect root, and that is 5. And then we have to leave that inside the root, so you get 2. So your final answer for the simplified radical of square root 50 is 5 root 2. All right, so in IM3, a lot of what you're doing is involving just simple equations, exponentials, expressions, stuff like that. So now we're gonna move on to function composition, which is probably a big thing that you'll need for this test. And let's just say we're gonna do a basic f of g of x problem. So that means you're taking g of x, the original function, and then you're multiplying it by f of x. Let's say we have f of g of 1. So what you're going to do is take g of 1, which let's say is 2. So then you're just going to take f of 2. But let's try this with an actual example. So let's say that f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. And let's say that g of x is just our simple x squared. So what are we going to do? We're actually just plugging in g of x into f of x. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take that, plug it in there, and we're going to get 2x squared plus 1. And that is our final equation for f of g of x. You're basically stacking functions on top of each other like pancakes. All right, now let's move on to average rate of change, or AROC, AROC. So this is just a fancy IM3 sort of way of saying the slope between 2 points. So let's say that we have our basic f of x equals x squared. And that's just our basic parabola. We know that. Let's say the question asks us to find the average rate of change between x equals 1 and x equals 3. So how would we go about doing that? So you're just going to plug that in. You can do it either way. You can do 1 minus 3 or 3 minus 1. But for the sake of this video, let's just do 3 minus 1. So that's going to be on the bottom. On the denominator, we're going to have 3 minus 1, because rate of change, as we know, or slope, is y over x. So now what you have to do is you have to match those points with the points up top. So we've got to have f of 3 minus f of 1. So what is f of 3 going to be? That's just going to be 3 squared, which is 9. Then we're going to have 1 squared, which is just 1. So you get 9 minus 1 over 3 minus 1. And 9 minus 1 is 8. Over 3 minus 1 is 2. So 8 over 2 is equal to 4. Alrighty everyone, I really hope you enjoyed this video and it helped you. This is the end of this video, and I wish you all the best of luck on your IM3 EOC. Peace out.